about that?
No, what happens is Teams has its own control for audio.
You just move it.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to.
I mean,
Yeah, I'd already had.
Sure.
It's not even control.
Back to the meeting.
Okay, how's that?
Yep. I think we're good.
Okay, here we go.
All right. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Good to go, Bernie?
Good to go.
Good to go. All right. Welcome, everyone. It is August. This year has gone by so quickly. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm finding it's crazy fast. Before we get going on the actual presentation, big thank you out there to our sponsors. So Codify and Microsoft, without these guys, this would not be possible. So Codify for the pizzas, the beers, the great experience that you're having now, and Microsoft for the venue and for the host. So thank you very much. Being a community event, we're really keen to get people involved. So if you've got something you want to talk about, hopefully not just wanting me to talk about something, put your hand up. We're really keen to hear from you. So it's all about getting involved. So it doesn't have to be a full session. We can pair you up with some other people. It doesn't have to be on the latest and greatest. It could just be on what you really enjoy. In fact, that'd probably be better from my perspective, is like, how are people using Azure? What are you actually enjoying? That's valuable. You know, like that adds value to the community. The newest and shiniest things, yeah, stuff changes a lot. Okay, so tonight we have Bernie. So, like I was saying, opportunities, get involved. We have an email address there. Flick us an email. We are keen to hear from you. We have openings for the rest of the year. All right. So, who has something that they've seen in the last month that they're excited about? Anybody? One thing? Yeah.
It's probably been well published, but I think AI Foundry is pretty interesting.
That's cranking.
There's a lot you can seem to do without doing any coding at all, which I always am super suspicious of as a developer, but it's very interesting. Yeah.
I am currently writing code with no writing code, and it's scary. Yes, absolutely. Anything else?
Newest open source models from OpenAI.
Oh, AI, yeah. Everyone's talking about AI. I'm not talking about AI. I'm trying not to anyway, because like it's always just takes all the oxygen out of the room, and I don't disagree. Don't disagree. It's amazing. AI is amazing, and the amount of productivity you can do with AI tools these days, it's crazy. One of my mates can't code, but has written more code than anyone else. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know what to say. You don't need to know what you're doing at all in any way. So yeah, I mean, that's
just on that point. The outcome from the code that is created.
Well, it depends how you judge an outcome, right? If you're talking about outcomes as practical results of the code, amazing, best outcome ever. If you're talking about an outcome as far as like a developer's perspective on maintainability, let's not talk about that. But then to balance that out, how many developers are going into a foreign code base these days and are actually going, the code base needs to look like this. And how many developers from now on will actually care? Just you know, and I'm not I am a developer. I'm not a developer hater, but developers are done.
So what did he use to create the code?
Just ChatGPT, right?
Well, Copilot, GitHub Copilot, then his code.
But to begin with, it was just old school. It was like cut and paste. Yeah,
I gave them tools
yeah,
and then get them on the phone.
yeah. Yeah, it's terrifying. It's fundamentally terrifying.
We created, we don't have any Go developers.
Yeah.
We need to test compatibility with Go SDK, our software.
Yeah.
And it took like an hour use ChatGPT to create all those tests. No Go developers at all. Code codes that runs automatically and does automatic testing and finds bugs.
That's it. And the more you're using it, the less. So I used to be very opinionated. Everybody knows my love for C# and Blazor. In the last couple of months, I've started to go, does it matter? Does it really matter? Maybe it's Go. I hope that's on record. But anyway, all right. So a few updates. So Sentinel getting a data lake. So you know we've had a lot of advancements in Sentinel over the last couple of months. We've seen the AI stuff. I promised not to talk about AI, and I've already failed. So Sentinel is getting a lot more powerful, and now with the data lake capability, you're able to push all of that data in there and start looking for long-term trends far more effectively. And with the built-in AI, yeah, it's quite powerful now. So expiration policy for shared access signatures. Who's using shared access signatures? Yeah, you shouldn't manage identities. But anyway, sorry, that was a trap.
I'm using them because people used them a long time ago, and I haven't switched.
Yes, 100%.
I'm not using them for new things.
100%. But if you did have a love for shared access signatures and you wanted to use that, they're a little bit Wild West-ish from a holistic governance perspective. Well, now we've got these policies that we can put in place to actually look at expiry times, look at, you know, globally these shared access signatures in our setup across all of the systems, and we can actually sort of say, hey, let's alert if these conditions are happening. I mean, you can also block requests, but that's pretty extreme. You probably don't want to take down your production apps.
Is it actually possible to disable forced expiration so that SaaS can be used indefinitely? And we have a scenario.
So, oh, hang on. Did you say the opposite? Sorry.
Yeah, because SaaS allows to limit specific containers.
Yes.
They have access to. And we got customers who don't want to give access to all containers, but at the same time, their bug is overcomplicated, like Enter-ID integration. So, and they have to rotate a signature. If they forget to rotate, they got production downtime.
Yeah, I'm sure that there would be some clever things that you could do to make the policy work with it to get some more automation triggering of policy. Alert, you know, so your policy, you can absolutely raise events and all sorts of stuff like that. You could think about ways to take that and then automate and renew. Ideally, taking people out of the loop for those activities if possible. Infrastructure as code, preferably. So think about, you know, ways that you might be able to piggyback off the. So it's just Azure policy, right? So all the things that you're doing in Azure policy today. Yep.
Yeah. So the thing I see only base here, but it would be cool if we could set it to, for example, 100 years.
Yeah. No. That's not what this is about. So, but like I'm trying to work with you here, and I think you could trigger off and do some automation. It's not solving the problem that you're after. You want the same key for 100 years. It's probably not a great idea.
So that's the default though, right? If you don't set the expiry, then you can create SaaS signatures that have a very long time.
There is default limit. So when you create a signature, you specify limit. So each time you create, this signature have limit built in and sign.
Yes.
And before, as I understand, it was some upper limit. I don't remember what it was, but it's relatively short. Like 2 months, 2 weeks, I believe, something like that.
I think you can do really long ones. I mean, I'm not saying you should. But I think you do really long.
Anyway, so it's years, right?
Yeah, it's years. But you don't want to.
But this is the opposite of that, right?
This is the opposite.
This is like I did a SaaS that had a 5-year expiry, and now I want to have a policy in my business that no SaaS should have longer than
That's right.
a year expiry.
That's right.
And now I'll flip to block and actually start blocking those.
That's
even though that was
100%. So it's not solving that
it's
problem.
not doing that.
It's not doing
It's
that.
actually doing the opposite.
It's the opposite.
It's trying to increase the security with a policy, not decrease the security.
Yeah.
What happened if I set it to disable in this?
Well, that just kills it, right? Like, so that key doesn't work anymore.
If you set the policy to disable, then it won't log or block SaaS usage if it goes over the.
Oh, sorry.
So and it allows me to create fast token with 100 years expiration.
Outside of it.
Yeah.
There'll be a maximum Microsoft limit.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
yes, you can do it to the maximum limit.
Which is like 1 year or something. Relatively
It's
short.
quite a long time.
I think it's more. But
Yeah.
But you don't want to.
Probably too long.
That's definitely too long. Anyway, so durable functions. So when they came out with this, they tied it to the PowerShell SDK. They pulled it out, made it separate. So it's got now an increased release cadence coming along with that. So you can see some more aggressive updates for that technology. Previously, they were very cautious, and now they're sort of a little bit free, so they can do what they want. So orchestration versioning in durable functions is coming out with a preview. So it's, for anyone doing integration, it's like a lifelong problem. It's like you've got messages with different versions, and the orchestrations have got versions, and it'll do a lot of work to make that happen. So this is now a feature that allows you to manage that, takes a bit of that pain away from you. I don't know, something like that. So hopefully you have less work that you have to do yourself. So Event Hub's geo replication has gone GA. That's pretty cool. For those people who are using Event Hubs, agentless multi-disk crash consistent backups. It's a big mouthful. So that's about getting those backups of your VMs that are all aligned, crash consistent. So if you have an outage, you've got like that consistent restore point that you can go back to. And agentless. That was pretty much it this month. Not a huge amount of stuff. So last couple of months we've been a bit light on. Yeah.
The Sentinel data lake, is that just a data lake environment for data that was already in there? Or can you use that to write out logs for, say, longer than they would by default be retained?
I believe that's the intent for it. The technical details of whether it's already there or not, I'm not 100% sure. But the intent is that you bring your security logs into that environment, and then you get the power of all of the data lake things.
And is that folded into like a Fabric One Lake type thing?
I haven't seen it yet, but
just interesting that it's big.
Well, so those data lake storage accounts in Fabric, you can bring them into Fabric really easily. So it's still side by side, I'll say. It's not embedded in Fabric itself, but yeah, like very very simple to connect and bring that stuff into Fabric. Yeah, 100%. So Anyone else have any other things? I wasn't much this month, but that's what I found. A few resources that we got, and a few blogs, and yeah, that's it. I'm going to hand it over to Bernie. So obviously everyone knows Bernie. He needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him an introduction anyway. So Bernie is our gracious sponsor, host is the right word, isn't it?
Yep.
Host. So I do have that right written down. So tonight we're going to look at infrastructure as code. Just lost that, so I'm just going to have to link it. So in MCP with Bicep, super interesting. And Bernie has been actively doing development recently in the Kubernetes area.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I apologize for that terrible introduction. But yeah, I'm really keen. Let's see if we can get this hooked up. And
So basically, there was issue.
let's see. It's like it's not coming up.
I suppose anybody has a HDMI adapter. Yeah.
I've got a cable.
Yeah, so you
What, oh, what is my adapter, USB to HDMI?
Yeah.
Think of that one.
Why says food automate? Good for you. Wasn't it? Show box. Now. Go on.
Yeah.
So, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
This one?
But if it's a custom giving you access to their
Doing something.
That is better. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Dan. All righty.
Yeah.
Cool. Yes, my name is Bernie White, and basically we're going to look at how you can pretty well start with MCP, but specifically we'll look at how you can accelerate infrastructure as code development. But I guess before I sort of go into too much of the nitty-gritty and the details, is I do want to sort of highlight that this is like one use case, right? Hopefully the things that I share really will be broadly applicable, right? So not everybody uses Bicep. Not everybody even wants to do it from an infrastructure as code or from a coding language perspective. The general concepts of MCP and how that sort of ties together are probably applicable in a business sense as well. So I guess keep that in mind. But I've got a specific use case. So hopefully that will frame the broader context for you, which is, yeah, basically development with infrastructure as code, which is something that I'm very passionate about. Like Damien said, I'm a software engineer. I work at Microsoft. I work on some of the backend systems related to Azure Kubernetes Service. I have been around a little while, so if you want to go ahead and have a look at some of the projects that I've been working on, feel free to, or come and see me. So in terms of MCP or Model Context Protocol, then in short, really it's just a standard API that AI systems know how to use to basically add context dynamically. And so this, I guess, excerpt below is really from pretty well the I guess the main page that sort of explains it. So hopefully I've summarized it as well a lit, but I guess the idea here is that when a model gets basically gets generated, basically gets trained, then a certain amount of data goes into that, and after that it potentially becomes stale. And realistically, when you train an LLM, if you are doing that, then there's probably other cases whereby you want to have much more dynamic data coming in and out, right? Nobody really wants to retrain a model every single time, although that's getting faster and more and cheaper to do on a regular basis. There's still a reasonable amount of work that goes through it to get a good model out the other end, right? And so for practical cases, though, you know, we've got things like databases or other information that we may want to use as part of a broader application, right? And so basically it's just a standard way to plug data in. It has been sort of referred to as sort of like the USB for AI systems and things like that. But hopefully, as I go through the demonstrations and things like that, which is pretty well, there's not too many slides, it's mostly demonstrations, you get a bit of a feel for how that actually works in practice. So primarily there's two ways that we're sort of seeing at the moment that are the most popular ways to plug in MCP. Via HTTPS, which is probably no surprise to most people, in terms of it's an API, might have a HTTPS endpoint that people can call. And in our specific scenario, we have GitHub Copilot, who is then obviously sitting within the VS Code experience in my specific demos. Also, it sort of sits outside of VS Code as well, in the GitHub web experience as well. But then Visual Studio Code has effectively maybe one or more MCP servers that it has access to. And these MCP servers, they effectively expose, again, tools or things that you can do, is really, and then it's up to the actual LLM model coordinating with Visual Studio Code to then pick the things that it's interested in to do a specific job, right? What it actually does, completely arbitrary. It could be anything. It could talk to anything. It doesn't even need to talk to a backend server, right? In this case here, it's going to perform some actions or get data. That could be static content that's just running in the binary, but more than likely, it's probably going and talking to something else or generating something or executing something. Maybe executing a local command line or talking to a database or adding a record somewhere, right? Whatever you can imagine. Another way to integrate with that is via standard input output. And so in this particular case, it's almost exactly the same diagram, except really now your MCP server is actually just a binary. It's just a process. It's running, and we're sending stuff into the process and out of the process. Again, it could be just processing things in memory. It could be calling things on the file system or doing other things in memory, or calling a remote endpoint, right? Whatever you want. So let's jump into some demos. So to sort of start, let's jump back to that and that. To start, let's just have a very brief orientation of how that works within Visual Studio Code and Copilot. So within Visual Studio Code, there's a little pop-up here. Again, there's shortcuts you can use to open the chat. And then you have this experience here, which is basically just interacting with Copilot. There's a few different things that have changed here over the last 6 months, and obviously it's regularly updated. Originally, it was just asking GitHub Copilot a question, and then it moved to, hey, it can also do updates for you. And now it's the agentic or the agent version, which then has a little bit more complexity to it. And you'll sort of see what that means as we go through it. Again, it's not really a presentation about Copilot. It's really about plugging things in and how things connect. There's also like configuring modes, which is pretty cool as well, which actually allows you to make more of a hybrid. Instead of those 3 options, you can actually make it more of a hybrid approach as well. The other thing that you want to know about is this click here, which is basically plug in the models, right? As part of a GitHub Copilot subscription, you have access to a certain amount of models. Some of them are included, some of them consume premium credits and all that sort of stuff. It's also possible to bring your own models and effectively plug in an open API key and run a model locally and connect to it via HTTP and all that sort of stuff too. So you've got lots of options there. The other thing you'll sort of notice here is that there's this, in this agent mode, again, there's a big difference between ask and then agent. It sort of adds in these additional tools. And so if you click there, then this basically sort of gives you an inventory of what's currently running in VS Code in terms of those tools that it can interact with. What are the things that it can do? So there's a bunch of things that you'd expect, like get gifs of change files because it's a code editor, fetch files from repos, execute local commands, run tasks, all that sort of stuff, check test failures. But then there's also potentially other things that sort of fall in here, which then these are all the additional MCP servers that might get plugged in, right? There's lots of different ways that then an MCP server might come in. It's actually a very big growing list at the moment. So an MCP server could come in via an extension. So example here, the MCP server here, I'm pretty sure that one has just appeared because I have an extension installed that then registers that MCP server. It doesn't appear down here, which this is the extensions tab, which then sort of shows additional MCP servers that you registered. So it doesn't appear there, but it's because it's coming in through an extension. Again, I did install the extension for the MS Docs as well. And again, you can sort of see all the things that it does, such as, in this case, the Docs one just searches Microsoft documentation. The Learn page is pretty good in terms of actually pulling in current Microsoft documentation. Again, there's a whole bunch of stuff for Azure. There's stuff for Bicep, which again, this is experimental coming through the extension. And then GitHub Copilot for Azure. Again, things such as go ahead and do a pre-deployment check quota availability, all these types of things that your Copilot may want to leverage, right? You can turn them on and off. And you can also create tool sections, which is experimental, which allows you to create a predefined list of them as well, if you want. The other thing to note is that you'll sort of notice as we go through the demos, it'll automatically add references to context automatically. But you can also go ahead and always add context or change context as well. So if you want to pull in a specific file or specific tools, then you can also do that too. So it's worthwhile noting, again, that may change your experience as well. So let me just flick across to my cheat sheet. So we did all that. In terms of a list of MCP.
That's the coolest thing that shipped recently. Hey, this is awesome. Just one click, boom, and you get it in VS Code.
Yep, absolutely. So on the docs or the Visual Code documentation page basically now has an MCP tab. You can get it straight within VS Code as well. I'll show you that in a sec. But basically, it's basically a catalog of MCP servers that are pretty well good to go for VS Code. And again, this is sort of like, it feels like it's almost appeared overnight. It hasn't quite, but it is accelerated very, very fast. Yeah. So then there's all these things that, again, you may actually want to use and then plug in. You may not necessarily want to use a whole bunch of them. Again, maybe they're not interested in it at all. But the cool thing about this is that you can pick and choose what you want. And if you have a need for these things, then obviously there's something pre-built that you can just leverage, right? Which is pretty cool. Again, it's pretty well click on the button and it just appears in VS Code, right? What that generally does is basically go ahead and configure a config file. But before I get into that, let me just show you examples. So we talked about the way an MCP server can run HTTP or via standard IO. So I just wanted to show that quickly because again, it may not necessarily be quite obvious for everybody about what that actually means. Because again, if you sort of go through LinkedIn or various different feeds, you obviously hear a lot of people talking about different things, particularly around security of MCP. Again, it's sort of almost sprung up overnight. So it's sort of good to have a bit of additional context about, okay, well, if you actually wanted to use this in your environment, what does that actually mean for your security? Obviously, if you're calling web endpoints, then absolutely you should be thinking about authorization using OAuth and things like that and securing them up properly. But there also might be cases whereby, maybe exposing it locally might be okay, maybe not. There's things around that then may make sense. You'll notice, though, a fair few of the Microsoft ones that have appeared, at least in recent times. Some of them are remote or they're HTTP endpoints that you call, like the docs one as an example, because it doesn't need auth, right? But then there's also some that are actually just sort of an extension almost of the Azure CLI. They run locally, they have local CLI auth, and they're basically just processes that you're talking to, like any other process, right? So let me go ahead and run an example. So I'm running a process. It's doing nothing. That's what it's meant to do. But now let me go to my little cheat sheet. And so this is basically how that sort of works in terms of the protocol, sort of like a sub protocol that's running over this is called JSON RPC, which effectively is just JSON in a specific format. So if we go ahead and paste that in, or even better, Control click and then enter, we get a response back, right? So that was basically the request response process. If we go ahead and just copy this out and then format it nicely, right? Because again, we might be interested in actually what it says, and go ahead and format document. You can sort of see, hey, this is the MCP server basically saying, here are the list of tools that I have, right? Because that's one of the features of MCP is tell me what tools you have, and then that's how Visual Code in this case goes ahead and populates that list, right? It can also be dynamic, so there's actually a process to sort of say, hey, I've got new tools or the tools have changed. Go ahead and update your list as well. But effectively, that's sort of what it's doing, right? So that's how your standard input output works. In terms of, let's give it a go. So I have some, like I said before, I do have some tools installed, as you could see the list. There's a fair few generic ones. I might just, argument's sake, go ahead and leave the built-in ones, but I'll turn off some of the Azure ones, right? Because really we want to see, well, what's life without some of the additional context, right? Because that's sort of the pre-MCP, that's the sort of world we're in, right? So let's go ahead and ask a simple question. You can create a, maybe I'll give it a little bit more, create a Bicep module for a storage account. And so in the agent mode, really what we expect, instead of just in asking questions, we actually expect that at some point to actually create the code for us, right? So let's go ahead and hit enter on that and see what it does.
Is there much to do here around like prompt tuning, like phrasing it as instructions versus questions, or is that kind of takes
Yeah.
it away by a middleware layer.
Sort of. I mean, so it's a great question. So in terms of do you have to be a prompt engineer to use this, right? You might have heard on LinkedIn or on the web or just from your colleagues that then, interacting with LLMs, you sort of need to maybe understand how to use them, right? It's not necessarily just as simple as asking a question. It may actually be a little bit more involved in that process and a bit of a science in itself. I think that for the most part, there is absolutely some aspect of GitHub Copilot and what's sort of referred to as like a system message that then is sort of part of the tool in itself that happens as part of that. That's the message that I sent is not the only message that actually ended up at the LLM, right? We can sort of see it's at the moment. Let me just finish this off and we'll actually see some of the detail. So you can sort of see I must have left one tool in there and it's basically sort of saying, hey, based on this, I'd like to run this tool, right? MCP has this concept of flagging certain actions as destructive, open world, so it needs to talk out to some other source, and a few other different things that then might be important. And under the right conditions, then the client, which in this case is VS Code, can sort of say, hey, do you want to really run that tool, right? In this case, it's not destructive. It's going and talking out to basically docs to get best practices effectively. But it's because it's talking out to the internet. That's the reason why it's prompting me. And we can actually go ahead and sort of say continue. There's also some other options as well. I'm just going to click continue each time to let it do its thing. So it's running this tool. It's going to get some results. It'll probably suggest, hey, this is what I want to do. And then it will create some code. While it's doing that though, so again, it's sort of, is this your request to like make a language model call? Do we want to allow that? Yes. In this session. Cool. Here's my plan. This is what I plan to do. Go do it. And it's going to do some stuff. While it's doing that, let me just sort of point out a few things.
So you almost need a button for that command. Go do it. The
Sort
amount
of.
time to type that. It'd be great.
Or just yes is also pretty good as well.
Just
But yes, maybe.
yes.
Yeah. So a few things to point out. So you can sort of see it's generated some code. It used a reference. So this reference here, you'll see it actually pulling other references when I add them. But at the moment, there's this basically a setting that basically provides some instructions that you've defined. This is actually, this setting here, I believe is actually a legacy thing. So that's actually disappearing. There's another instructions that I'll sort of show you in a little while. That's what's recommended. You can sort of see the tool. You can actually see the input and output of each of those in a broad sense. But also, there's also the ability to go ahead and actually see, well, what actually happened fully under the covers. So I think it's one of these, but if you Control-Shift-P and then bring up chat, there is, but it's over here, but there is an option here, which is like a debug. Previous changes.
Chat debug.
Did you see it?
Second option underneath the chat section.
Yeah.
Keep scrolling down, wait till chat. It's no longer the first word.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, basically that'll pop this up if it's not there anyway. And basically this is in a session, basically that's what's happened. And if you actually click into it, so it's, I think at the bottom, it's coming from top, the start to the bottom. So if we go ahead and click into here, you can actually see, let me just pop that out of the way for a sec. You can sort of see this is like what happened underneath the covers, right? So, hey, it actually interrogated tools, it got a whole bunch of stuff, and you'll sort of start to see some information appear here. if we go ahead and look at this option here, again, was the output. I think on one of these at the top here, it'll sort of say, here's the system message. So, hey, your role. So again, I didn't define this. This is just part of GitHub Copilot. But again, similar coding agents would have something similar, right? Here's what you do.
So it's doing the prompt engineering for you underneath the hood.
But yeah, they all.
Yes and no.
All,
Yes and no. Right?
they all do this though, right?
Yeah.
They all sneak in a
all
large markdown file and
Exactly.
instructions
Right.
with your prompts. Yeah.
Yeah, because you
Slide
want
together.
the response to come back of, something to be in the context of code, right?
Yeah.
You want it to actually generate your code as opposed to, I don't know, give you an architecture diagram, right? There's stuff in there. There's also things about to make sure or to encourage well use of the model as well. So don't do harmful things and that sort of stuff, or create exploits or something like that. So this is the code that it generated. It's pretty straightforward. It's something probably mostly like it did fetch best practices, which is awesome. And it got some information, as we could sort of see easily here, which was basically here's some technologies, prefer managed identities for key-based, never use key-based authentication, yada, yada, yada. It's got some information. I think, there's a little bit more to it that you can't sort of quite see, but you can sort of see as you scroll down, or if you look in the other debug page. I guess in terms of this example, that's great. It's not too bad in what it's generated from that perspective, because it did pull in some best practices, which it addressed. But I guess this is probably mostly like sample code that you get from Microsoft Docs, right? Or something similar, right? It's fairly textbook standard code, right? The challenge is, of course, is in an organization, we have coding standards and other things that play into what actual code you write. How do we start to give GitHub Copilot or the LLM and the coding agent information that actually allows it to produce the right results or closer to what is accepted within the organization the first time? Question.
So one of recommendations, best practices, is to use latest API version. For storage accounts, latest API version is 2025-0101. That is 2 years old. So if I try to submit it as a managed application template, for example, it wouldn't pass validation. So it is good that we can automatically apply best practices, but it looks like they still need to be checked manually.
Absolutely. Yeah, so fantastic point. Basically the point is that, hey, it's using an older version of the storage API. Shouldn't it use a newer one, right? And in some environments, that wouldn't be allowed, right? So I don't have a demo on that. That's a perfect use case of where you could absolutely leverage MCP. And maybe there's already something there. There's definitely some Bicep experimental stuff that you saw in the extension that I had up before, which is then going down those directions. Is it shipped today? Don't know, but let's find out and see if it does it.
Can MCP completely replace prompt engineering?
Can MCP completely replace prompt engineering? I think with prompt engineering, I guess, really, by defining a good prompt, you provide context, right? And so in the absence of good context, then it may, very loosely do what you want it to do. So I guess really, will it change prompt engineering as a discipline, which is a very new discipline anyway? Who knows, right? But I think that what it does solve, at least to a degree, and I'm sure it will improve over time, because again, it's appeared almost out of nowhere, is that it provides additional context, right? Which is really what the idea of prompt engineering is. So does it solve it entirely? Time will tell, I think. But does it significantly improve the process? Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry to keep interrupting. I don't know if protocol is the right term, but one of the protocols or tools or whatever they call it in MCP is for MCP servers to exchange contact. It's like a prompts. So they can actually, an MCP server can suggest back a prompt to your LLM. And if your LLM likes it, it can just execute the prompt. So the MCP server itself becomes part of the AI by suggesting prompts, and they can exchange. Like if you have multiple MCP servers, they can keep swapping prompts together until it gets back to the LLM and then works out the prompt and then runs it automatically.
Yeah,
so it's more than just data. It's actually, they're talking and they're having a conversation about prompts, which is kind of a bit hard for me to get my head around.
Yeah.
Or the gentleman down there had a comment.
Oh, so I was just going to say it also defaulted to standard LRS as well.
So
It also defaulted to standard
good
LRS.
point. Yes, we've got our one of our resident best practice experts in here, and yes, it did skew and standard LRS. Again, depending on your context, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Again, it's fairly textbook example, so I've chosen LRS. Sorry, there's another question down there. Sorry.
That's all good. I was just sort of saying, is MCP effectively a service that runs on a server, so effectively a daemon or something, or?
So yes, it's an API. So as I sort of tried to explain before, it could be a remote endpoint that we call, like a HTTP. It could be a HTTP endpoint, HTTPS endpoint that runs locally too. It could talk to local hosts, because again, all this is executing not in GitHub cloud somewhere. This is executing on the machine locally in terms of what tools have run. But it could also be just input output from an executable, right? So it could be anything. But it is, MCP is a protocol, so it's not just an arbitrary executable. It's basically being designed to send input output in the right format, right?
Just on the point about replacing prompt engineering, it's kind of, you're still going to have some level of it, but it's abstracting up where that has to sit. And rather than having one monolithic LLM that's very generalized, it lets you have specific models that are trained to work on specific languages or contexts or topics. So you could have one that does diagrams and entity relationship and mermaid, and then you have one that you interface with, and it might go, oh, this component I need to do documentation. It's my general request. I need this bit to do me some configuration diagram, this bit to describe how my databases are all connected, this bit to describe how the code orchestration works, and they all kind of call into each other, and they can all be built to tailor and give better results for their specific role, rather than being a very generalized one that's designed to spit out war and peace.
Okay. Can I ask one question? And that is simply, if you're orchestrating a set of MCPs, then it's sort of doing my head in a little bit in terms of the content that you're putting within each of those. When does the LLM actually even know to listen, or is it the MCP sticks it with a, you've got to listen to me now because this is relevant to where you are, but I can't see how it'd even know to do that, or there's no prompt to do that, is there?
Yeah, so I guess like in short, it sort of has done that. Again, in this case here, Visual Studio Code locally is the orchestrator. The LLM has a part to play. It has the syntactical information. That's what knows how to choose the right patterns and things like that in broad sense, and knows about the language. But then and semantic management of those terms and things like that. But when it comes back to, again, Visual Code, it's providing, here are the list of tools that I have, which may or may not sit on an MCP server, right? But then as a result, the LLM is making a decision based on its logic and the model itself of, hey, based on this set of tools that I want to do, here are the things that I want to execute. And in the agentic type world, where we've got this agent-based thing, it will actually loop back on itself and actually do things like confirmation and things like that multiple times. So again, it's all growing. I will proceed on with the demo though, because we can definitely spend a lot of time on it. So I guess what I wanted to illustrate though is that we have a fairly generic textbook example sample that's come out the other end, which is great. But the reality is that we don't use textbook or samples directly pretty well in our environment for the most part. We typically have to massage them a bit and make them right for our environment. So let's see, again, this is a live demo, if we can actually get that what we want, right? So now it's going to ask me, do I want to keep it or part of it, or I could interact with it and get it to fine tune, right? It will absolutely go ahead and basically update the code. If I had an existing bit of code here that I just wanted to update, again, it would sort of show the bits which do you want to keep and things like that. It would just edit the actual code because it's a brand new file that it created. It created a new file just right in the root of the repository. And it's a brand new file. It's basically all green, saying, do you want me to keep it or not? In this case here, I'm going to keep it. And then I will go ahead and just start a new session.
Does it always create a file in the root, or can you specify where it creates that file within the prompt, or is that
absolutely? Yeah, absolutely. You can give it information. I could have just said, yeah, you created in the wrong location, create it here instead, and it would have moved the file or updated it, right? But again, let's try and get it to do it right the first time, if at all possible, without interacting too much or with only a few iterations. So I guess the first little trick, again, we sort of said there's something that Copilot is adding called a system message, and there was the prompt that I gave it, and it worked out a set of tools that it could use. I've created a new session. So again, fresh slate, it has no memory now, apart from what's currently in my repo, which is the same as what I had before. So let's add the first bit of information. So there's something called Copilot instructions, which, in fact, I'll just copy both files. So basically, it's just a file, normally formatted in Markdown, but again, it's really just arbitrary text that then the LLM is going to read and use as part of its prompt. So Markdown is great because it is basically arbitrary text anyway, but it also is slightly easier for people to read. So, but ultimately, it could actually just be a text file with no formatting at all. And so this is just more a file specifically that GitHub Copilot knows how to use. And if I go ahead and ask the same question as I did before, which I will copy exactly for the sake of our experimentation. And so let me kick it off, and then we can just quickly talk about the file. So you can sort of see in here, we have some additional information. So, hey, this is infrastructure's code. I'd actually changed my prompt last time because I put in the word bicep when I first ran it, which I didn't this time. It's basically Azure, code's written in bicep, and there's a bunch of rules such as, hey, if we're creating reusable code such as a module, we should put it in a modules directory. If we're creating deployments, then we should put it in the deployments directory, and files should be named like this. And then specifically for bicep, there's some specific information here about, here's some additional information. Here's some basic conventions that you might have access to, yada, yada, yada. Some of this stuff I actually haven't added, so it'd be interesting to see what happens here. But again, now you can sort of see it said, instead of one reference, it says it's used two. And you can sort of see it's automatically pulled in this Copilot instructions, right? Again, other coding languages probably do something similar, but basically this is a way that for my repo, I can just add something that's context specific to my repo, and it's going to be included in every basically request. So I've just added context to my prompt, right? Without actually doing anything apart from creating the file. And now it's already got the bit of the gist, right? It's already suggesting, hey, I want to go ahead and create files in this directory. We might go ahead and say it's going to create a module. I said, I want to create a module? So it's picked the right directory. So fantastic. So Let me know if you want to customize it. No, let's just go, yes, go ahead and continue. And again, let's sort of see what it does. So now, if we sort of have a look here, it's created a modules directory which didn't exist before. It's created a storage directory which didn't exist before. It's created a file, and it's called up the right thing. And again, we didn't add heaps more context because there wasn't anything specifically about the specific standards we want to add. So it's sort of done some stuff. Again, mostly textbook, slightly different. Again, also LRS and also old API version, right? Let me know if you need to add tests and further customizations. Again, I'm not going to, but absolutely, I could sort of say, do that stuff, and it will go ahead and do it. I could go ahead and sort of say, maybe, can you do it with WAF best practices? And again, it's going to pull in, hey, here's some files that I've added in. It now decides, hey, I want to write some best practices. So I've got to actually go and talk to something to work out what they are, right? So it's going to call a tool from an MCP server. And again, it's going to do a little bit more. It's also created a README, right? About that. I think I did have something in the instructions that you should create a README in a module. So because it's a module, it's created one. So again, hey, I've done this thing, or sorry. So it's updated it. We probably didn't see it because it just did it. Now it's sort of added a little bit more, right? It's added a bunch of other stuff. Again, similar to what it had before because it had the same sources, right? And there we go, right? I could go ahead and sort of say, hey, I want to run this API version, and I could put that in my Copilot file, and then it would do it, presumably. But we don't really want to hard code the API version in our file. So that's a prime example of where pulling information from an external source of what is the latest API version would be super useful, right? Let's go ahead and, again, undo, get rid of all that. Start with a fresh session and make sure we will leave our instructions there because we're building on it. Let's go ahead and delete. Happy days. And I might just commit these to my repo so I don't accidentally delete them. Working. Boom. And now let's go ahead and try something different, right? So now let's try a slightly different prompt. Let's double check what tools we have. I think because I've started a new session, they should all be selected, which is great. And now let's try a slightly harder example. So I want to create an application deployment for container app. Does it include a little bit more context in here because there's more stuff there? It knows that it should be called shopfront, and it knows it's a deployment. So we expect it probably put in the deployments folder. Let's give it a quick go and see what it comes up with.
Bernie, real quick question.
Mhm.
Have you seen very different results with different agent models?
Yeah. So absolutely, different models here will absolutely give you different results because they've been trained on different data, right? I'm using a GPT 4.1 because it doesn't consume any premium credits for me. So that's what I'm doing. And for the sake of the demo, obviously we want to keep it consistent. But ultimately, absolutely go ahead and try to your heart's content, different models. Some of them will give you probably slightly different experiences based on the coding language is what I have been told, and probably my own experience as well. Different languages or different models are probably slightly better at certain things. But again, they're all
They're
evolving.
not massive differences, just marginal differences.
I mean, yeah, I think to a degree, in my personal experience, it's probably marginal differences. But I would definitely, some of my colleagues have sort of said certain things they've experienced a much greater difference as well. So again, up to you. Pick one that works, or you may have one defined by your organization as well. So that's what it is.
If one doesn't work, pick another one.
If one doesn't work, pick another one. Yeah.
Get a second opinion.
When you did the first demo, you disabled a bunch of MCP.
Yes.
The second one, I don't think you did.
No.
So they would have been running.
It had a little bit more context. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Need that in order to use the GitHub instructions.
No. So the GitHub instructions is the VS Code extension. It knows how to use that. So that doesn't really have anything to do with the models, and it doesn't have anything to do with the MCP servers. That's just the orchestrator GitHub Copilot. It basically looks for that as part of the first thing it does. If it's there, it'll use it. If it doesn't, it won't. Yeah.
Weird question off to the side.
Yep.
Are people selling access to their MCP server because it's better than anyone else's?
I haven't seen a commercial monetization of it yet. Could it happen in the future? Probably. You'd expect it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Rate limit.
Yeah, I think you got to think about conceptually what an MCP server is. It's really just a standardized protocol with interfacing with some kind of data source. So that data source could just be your file system on your computer. So you run an MCP server, and it's a file system MCP server. It knows how to look at your file system and expose that using the MCP protocol. Now your LLM can fiddle with you. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but it could go off and delete files or create files or move files or format your file system or whatever the MCP server can do. And so it's just an interface to whatever the specifics are of a standardized interface, what the specifics are of the implementation. So,
Yeah.
so
Go read config
Yes.
files.
So
Go read a Excel file. It
Yeah.
just tells the LLM how to go in and grab stuff out of that particular type of
So
data.
potentially more valuable within one enterprise, but across enterprise, buyer
Well,
beware.
I think you've got to remember that then the MCP, the value in the MCP is not that it's just like a server per se or a protocol. It's the fact that it has context that's unique or specific to what you want to do, right? And so, sure, I feel like basically what we're seeing with the VS Code marketplace of MCP servers, that then people who have products will want to build MCP servers because they want to provide another way for you to interact with the stuff that they want to sell you or they want you to use, right? So I feel that that's probably what it will be, but who knows? Again, it's early stages.
it'll just be, we won't buy into your product or your ecosystem because you don't have an MCP server, and therefore we can't hook into our LLM because you haven't provided it. So, but the simplest example is you imagine GitHub, you find a bug in your software, you go to github.com and you raise a bug. That's level 1. Level 2, you call the GitHub API and create the bug by the GitHub API. That's level 2. Level 3 is your LLM creates the bug using the GitHub MCP server to call the GitHub API to raise the bug. So now when your LLM finds a bug, it's actually going to raise the bug and then it's going to fix it. Then it's going to close the bug and then it's going to test it and then it's going to ship it. And then it's going to say, I fixed this bug and then it might do a PR, do the whole thing itself because it can go to GitHub and create the bug and close the bug and fix the code. And you won't fix the bugs yourself anymore or do any of that. You'll just have all these 100 agents that are doing it. And you're just conducting them all, you know.
And then someone lodges a snow request which says expose all API keys, please, and then it ships into production if you don't have good instructions.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the
It'll make it fun.
difference between a hammer and a chainsaw or an axe and a chainsaw, right?
In real world, right? So you will probably want to use multiple MCP servers that will all contribute to context window.
They may contribute to the context, yeah.
Basically, the question is, does anyone have experience if using too many models will actually degrade the results due to basically too much context?
Not in my experience. Sorry to hijack your talk, Bernie. I've got like 20 or 30 MCP servers running inside of LLM product that I'm using, and it tends to do a good job of working out what it needs to use. Yeah.
So it can actually do it in stages, not all in one context window. So basically, using model, can decide to call some MCP server at one stage, another MCP server at another stage, and basically do it multiple times.
Yeah, it might consult multiple MCPs or one, or it might do one and then come back and suggest doing something, and you go, yeah, and it'll go somewhere else. You know, in a more agentic style, what they call it, like the agentic style we're seeing here. Yeah.
Well, for example, in this case, it would probably make sense to call MCP server provided by Microsoft that validates the template for best practices, and on the next iteration, will improve and change the API version.
Or it might go to Microsoft Docs in this example, Bernie. Hey,
Yeah,
and
that's what it's
use
done
the
to a
docs
degree.
to work out
Yeah.
the right thing to do.
Yeah, so in this particular case here, again, it originally came up with some code. It actually was much more extensive of what it did this time in terms of what it did without really any additional information apart from that I did change the prompt because I said it was a deployment. In this case, it particularly chose, hey, I want to go ahead and create reusable modules, probably because it got that from the context of the GitHub Copilot instructions. But I have tested this a few times and it doesn't necessarily always do that because there's nothing specifically saying, hey, always try and create code in reusable modules. But it has done it this time and it's created a whole bunch of files. In terms of, hey, it got a deployment that then included both a container app and a storage account. The first iteration, I did give it an additional prompt by basically saying, can you fix the code errors? It did have some like issues which were related to like pathing and things like that, which it corrected in the second pass, but it didn't get the first pass. And so I committed it, I accepted the changes so you could sort of see what it did the second time. Quickly, yeah.
Can you ask it to update the instructions file to reference?
Yeah,
Put that
yeah.
in.
And yeah, so getting it to build your own instructions is a great way to do it. In fact, if you're starting from a fresh repo, there's actually a button that up here, no, on the cog, right, which is generate instructions. So if you have no instructions at all, and you go, hey, I've got repo with code in it, click that button, and it will go ahead and spit out an MD file that then has stuff that it's learned from your code base by basically parsing across it. And it's going to be good. And then you can always go ahead and update and modify it if you like.
I presume the LLM reads you the context from the code base and then generates an instructions file, basically.
Yeah.
So instead of remembering everything from your code base and writing the file, it maybe gets it 80% right. And then you just go through and fix a few things or tell the AI to fix it and loop around until you get an instructions file that represents what you want to do in your code base, and then tell it, like, you stuff this up, pay attention to the instructions, update the instructions, don't make this mistake again, you know?
Absolutely. And I have, in the past, I have specifically sort of said after a review cycle, like, based on what you learned from our review, please suggest some updates that would help you in the future, right? And that's pretty effective in actually getting what you want.
And you can use the GitHub MCP server to do that, right? I believe. Look at PRs and then make changes to the instructions.
Absolutely.
It's PRs, I believe. I've not done it, but yeah.
Yeah, you can. Absolutely. So there's that. Now let's go ahead and give it a little bit more information, right? So I guess we've got to the point whereby we've got a repo, we've got some instructions in there, but we're still lacking a little bit of stuff around, okay, well, what are my enterprise standards? Now I could put that all into a GitHub Copilot instructions file or a Copilot instructions file. I could do that. There's a few challenges with that. I mean, one, if I've got a bunch of repos, it means I need to do it for all of them, which is not too ideal. It also means that I need to update it too when it changes. And organizations, again, we change our standards all the time. So it happens, right? It creates additional overhead which is not ideal. So now this is a great opportunity for us to pull in context from somewhere else and then make it available to the LLM that's specific to our organization. So basically, I did just that. I basically created an MCP server, which you might have seen me run a little bit before, which then is just a command line tool. So it's using the standard in, standard out protocol like option. And the way I've chosen to do this is, I put my Bicep files and publish my modules to a container registry. So that's where I also want my architecture guidance or my patterns also to be. So I've basically gone ahead and created some patterns, such as my, let me see if I can zoom in slightly. I've got my at VNet spoke, I've got my container app, I've got my resource tagging, my secret storage patterns, right? And then if we can have a quick look at those over here. So slightly there. So if we look at my secret storage, then, hey, we've got this describes a pattern for secure storage of secrets. Here's some things. We should always use key vault, yada, yada, yada. I've also got things like resource tagging. Actually, I don't know if I saw that one. Yeah, resource tagging's there, right? Resource tagging. And chuck in. And yeah, basically now we've got a bit of additional context about our organization. So let's go ahead and add the MCP server into our environment. And so within, again, GitHub Copilot, or more specifically VS Code, knows how to handle this. And there is, there's a few different ways you can do it. Effectively, it will generate a mcp.json file. So let's just go through the GUI way. So if we go into extensions, we want to look at MCPs. We could click there, and that would take us to the VS Code site. Alternatively, I think if we go to the palette, so if we go up to palette, I just Control-Shift-P, and then if we go ahead and add an MCP server, it'll sort of say, hey, do we want to do it via standard in out or HTTP? So let's go ahead and do our standard in out. And so we want to run Azure, enter. We're running in our workspace, and I did forget just to put in the argument there, so let's put in MCP, right? Because I've decided to put it in my workspace, it just creates it as a file within the workspace, so it just becomes part of our infrastructure as code. You could obviously go ahead and create it global for your local user as well. Is also another option, but effectively just going to run this command line, and it has errored. That's okay, because one of the things that we needed to do first was that we want to go ahead and install our patterns, right? At the moment, there's no local patterns there, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and import our patterns from our container registry. But also because I'm running it there locally as well. All our patterns in. And so now what we expect is it will go ahead and create a directory and then pull the patterns that I've chosen in, which I've sort of said, go ahead and give me all the patterns under this prefix. So it will do that in a sec. And then we should be able to go ahead and run our MCP server and then get started with everything else. So let's go ahead and see if it works now. And it looks like it's running and happy, which is great. And it will continue to add those patterns, but that's fine, they're all there. And let's go ahead and now try our existing prompt and see if we get a different result. And so we should also be able to see if we go down to tools now and we scroll down now, because we've got this MCP server running locally, we should be able to see it there, and it's got basically two tools that it supports. And run that.
Bernie, just quickly, for anyone who's not familiar with PSRule, could you explain that perhaps concept?
Yeah, so I guess
Rule, if anyone.
yeah, so PSRule is a tool that I developed a while ago and continue to maintain. But basically, it is a infrastructure as code tool that then helps align best practices in an organization and coding for Bicep and ARM templates to the well-architected framework. So it has a bit of a history of that. And I guess we're sort of trying to like work out what's next in terms of that. And so this is part of it, obviously bringing in some of the enterprise context in this particular case, but no doubt there'll be other updates as well, right? And so, yeah, so now it's doing its thing. We've got a deployment. Again, it knows it's a deployment. It's in the deployment shopfront folder. It's added a whole bunch of stuff that it didn't think of before, right? If we go ahead and have a look what it actually looked at. So, hey, it pulled in our GitHub Copilot instructions file. It came up with a plan. I said yes, and it executed it. It then went and ran, hey, go ahead and get me approved patterns, right? And it found some patterns there, which then have a description of the patterns. It then proceeded to then work out, hey, for this particular one, I want to go ahead and read the container wrap pattern. And again, there was some context returned back from the MCP server as a result of what does a container wrap look like in our environment. Again, it also worked out, hey, I need to know a little bit about resource tagging. And again, also I need to know a little bit about secret storage, right? So it's basically pulled those things together. It then developed, it pretty well updated the plan. It also knew from the resource tagging one, because I also have some naming patterns in there, which I sort of brought up briefly before. It knew, hey, I need to name storage accounts using an ST prefix that looks something like that. So it sort of came up with an approximation of that by pretty well just concatenating that stuff together. That's for the container environment. For the storage might be somewhere else, right? For the container wrap. Container wrap environment, I actually didn't give I don't think I put a prefix in there. For storage, it got that. Container wrap, it sort of just did its own thing. For container wraps, I think I did CA, but let's have a look. Yeah, CA, right? So it didn't have a container wrap environment, so it just did its own thing, right? The other thing you'll notice is, who's familiar with AVM or Azure Verified Modules? I mean, few people. So Azure Verified Modules is sort of a set of Bicep templates that Microsoft curate and manage and update, and they are meant to like include a lot of the WAF best practices by default. You'll notice all the previous samples that we had before didn't try to use them at all, right? Even though it's a common thing, but they're not in the docs as specific examples, generally speaking. So it didn't try to use them, but my patterns actually said, hey, we use AVM for container wraps. So it started actually to pull that in, right? It actually did what we want it to do because that's our standard, right? Which is fantastic. Makes my demo a lot easier. It did have, there's a few little errors here, which again, it could correct on a second pass. Probably this is that storage account. It couldn't find that, which is why the reference down here is broken as well. Yeah, and it added a few different things in there. Managed account, storage accounts, it created over in a separate file. And again, it probably got a fair few things there. Again, didn't have anything for the actual version or for LRS, so it left it as is. But again, I could iterate on that, or I could add that context if I wanted to, but I haven't added that to go.
So storage account name in Azure can have dashes.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Your template
Was wrong.
dashes.
Yeah.
I'm curious, did it try at some point to complain about it? Because it should be a part of the model. It's basic information, right?
Yeah.
The model should be aware that dash is not allowed. So did it try to complain and suggest some changes or just follow instructions because, well, the user is the boss?
Yeah, it followed the patterns because that's what I told it to do.
So it will not correct the errors.
It won't, but you could absolutely go ahead and add that additional context in that, or update the instructions that were incorrect and make them proper.
Because my developers, if I tell them some requirements,
Yep.
That are not feasible, they come back to me and tell me I'm wrong, I should change requirements. So
That's true.
the case.
That's true. Yeah. And so if I had a way to validate that, I could actually do that. So there is actually a command line tool in the Azure CLI or REST API that I can check if the storage account name is available, or if it follows. I don't know if it necessarily is valid or not, but there's a few things like that. So I could actually potentially plug those things in, but I haven't for here, obviously, in this particular example. But I guess hopefully it sort of opens the ideas of what could you possibly do, right? And or what will, Microsoft and other companies already do that you don't have to build. But if there's something that's organization specific, then there may be an opportunity there to do something.
I mentioned earlier it had some flags for like risky actions, like some pre-built stuff around like don't delete files, let me know if it's going to go out to the cloud. Is that something you could put in either your instructions or some kind of, or is it pretty locked down how you can add those flags?
So the flags on the tools are exposed by the MCP server that then VS Code is talking to. I think that we sort of talked about before. You could have multiple MCP servers and a bit of an exchange between the LLM happening. It's also feasible to say that then you could also have, because it's just a standard interface, you could have an MCP, which is a proxy server for other MCP servers, which then enforces other rules in front of it. And VS Code just talks to that. And then any rules that then are sort of out of bounds of what your organization considers would then just be obviously overridden or blocked by the proxy as well, right? But who knows where it will go? There's definitely lots of options. In terms of, there is a few enterprise controls, which I do want to call out because I thought it was pretty cool on where it is today. But I can definitely see this changing. So within the VS Code documentation, there is centrally managed VS Code settings. And unsurprisingly, it has a whole bunch of ones that then, there's not that many controls there in terms of what's there at the moment for VS Code. But absolutely chat agent modes and stuff like that are actually part of that current control. So there's a way to apply it via Mac, but this would be a group policy type option as well for organizations. So the auto approve, because this is actually a setting you can set to just automatically approve all actions and just do them. You can block that at an organizational level, which is probably a great idea, so that people don't turn that on. But yeah, there's like prompt files and then chat MCP servers that you can then populate in via group policy and things like that. So pretty cool. Still early days, I feel, but there's definitely a lot of potential on what that would be in the future, right? Cool. So I think that's probably most, I think, of what I want to share in terms of the standard demo. But if there's any, go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, I did have one question, or maybe I wanted to get some ideas from you. One of the main reasons we all switched from ARM templates to Bicep was because of the readability of Bicep.
Yeah.
Nothing's really more readable than just like words. So do you think that like Bicep itself will go away and we'll just talk? Like we'll just write out like, I want a storage account, I want it to be geo-redundant, I want it, do you think the actual infrastructure as code will become infrastructure as conversation?
I mean, I think it's way too early to preempt anything like that. I think then generally, like as Microsoft, we try to do what then customers are wanting. I feel like nowhere on the horizon at any point in the short to medium term, customers are going to say, hey, I don't want Bicep anymore, right? Just give us a chat interface. So I feel like that's probably not a anytime soon on the horizon discussion at all, because people love Bicep. If they have been used to write infrastructure as code with ARM templates, and they don't do Terraform for whatever reason, right? They love it. So in the future, we'll like chat interfaces, delete all coding languages, and then that'll be the only interface. Again, probably not, I would sort of see, but obviously this will become like a standard way of interacting, right? So yeah, who knows? There's no secret Microsoft source that I'm sharing here on what the future is in terms of like Bicep or anything like that. But yeah, I feel like those things are here. They're supplementary, and something like Copilot or coding agents provides a really good way to interact with them, and a really good way to accelerate your development with infrastructure as code. So yeah, if there's any other questions, let me know. Go ahead.
Two questions, and I don't know how to position them. One I'm wondering is, where's the limit of using MCP? Where's the point where you say that needs to go into training of a model or into some other access sort of data set?
Sure. So good question. So I guess, MCP servers really, so if we go to the docs at a higher level, the specification, again, things are rapidly changing. The specification today for servers basically provides a set of features. So basically prompts, so this is stuff that's implemented server side. There's a few additional things that are implemented client side, but in terms of they can provide prompts, they can provide tools, which primarily being talking about tools, and they can also provide resources. In terms of the API spec for what servers currently do, that's it today. Could an MCP server have an LLM that it's referring to, or some other semantic model behind it? Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's just an API. If whoever developed that MCP server decided to put it like an LLM behind it as well to take other types of instructions, absolutely, it could have that too. There's no reason why it couldn't. There's no reason it has to either, though. That's just really up to the implementation that you choose, right? It doesn't have to have really any semantic or LLM smarts behind it. In this case here, I'm doing something very basic. I'm just reading a markdown file and providing that information back. But more specifically, the value that it has is that it's organization context specific, right? And so that's really the value of MCP. It provides that additional context dynamically. And what other like features an MCP server has in the future? Who knows? That'll be probably driven by the community since it's open source and they're taking a lot of feedback from the community. But hopefully that sets the groundwork for something really great in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question was, part of my background is control systems in large industrial plants.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the different vendors have their own configuration languages for the control system within their plant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, is MCP a possible way of adding to an LLM what's a whole configuration language for a particular vendor's products?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's an API. An API can be written for anything, right?
Yeah.
And it can absolutely translate to another language or protocol. So it could be, if you want to connect it to an LLM, absolutely.
Whether that vendor will make more money off selling you a solution that has an MCP add-in or they'll make more money making you go through their help desk and using their engineers. So
Yeah.
But
I guess-
because they publish their entire thing, you can load it into your own MCP and use it a generation ahead of when they decide
if
to
they
do
had
something.
published it,
Yeah. Okay.
Probably the only call out, just before I answer the other question, is just that then again comes back to the things that I shared around before in terms of the flags as well. At the moment, there's a certain set of flags in terms of destructive actions or open world and those types of things as well. Obviously, you know, whatever we do, we obviously do want to make sure though that we don't create a scenario that then actually is more accident prone than what it was previously, because the whole one of the, I guess, the benefits of this is that one, we're accelerating a process, and also that hopefully through some additional person or model that's looked at the code, then that may give an additional perspective. But again, ultimately, it's still a responsible AI model in terms of that then people need to drive it and make decisions and things like that. And obviously, if you want to have an action there, you obviously just need to make sure then that's the right thing to expose to the model and it has the right flags around it and the people that are executing it have the right permissions to do so, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Just on those lines, notwithstanding the flags that you just mentioned, so there is nothing that the MCP could not do. Can you just say where you would not use it?
Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess. So it's an API. An API can be done for almost anything, right?
So why you could not use it?
Yeah, but I guess over time there will be lots of MCP servers. But by the same token, we also need to think about, you know, should the MCP server have the ability to do certain actions, right? Maybe you do want it to have that permission, but under the guardrail of it requires a like authorization prompt or confirmation. But you don't want to have a situation whereby, hey, you've just dropped your production database and deleted all your customer records, and that was just because somebody was very quickly typing away and then just said, oh, yep, there's a confirmation prompt there, enter. Oops. So yes, you could expose it to anything, but obviously it's up to you as people who have now inherited this technology as part of the broader landscape and environment to use it correctly.
Because it's very powerful.
yeah, they could just all return the word Bob.
Yeah.
You'd have to check that it's not going to do that. And the person who makes the MCP server is not going to let you press the big red button that launches nukes without authorization. That's an API. You could do that, but you wouldn't.
Yeah, and there was already solutions that were already starting to do this, but I guess MCP now provides a standard way to do that. Go ahead, Dan.
We got a couple of questions online.
Sure, great.
So Danny said, no, picked up that you mentioned Azure Verified modules. You just wanted to know what the context was for bringing.
Sure, great question. So Azure Verified modules. Microsoft have some pattern guidance for the cloud adoption framework and well-architected framework. And so for a long time before AVM, customers were saying to us, hey, like it's great to give us all this documentation, but we still need to build it ourselves. And we need to start from scratch. And so basically through that feedback from customers, Microsoft actually decided to create, hey, let's go ahead and create some modules for you that then you can basically go ahead and adopt. So in this particular case here, the AVM is basically Terraform and Azure Bicep modules, which are basically just code that then allow you to build infrastructure or application patterns. And then instead of writing all the code for yourself, you can actually consume those modules. And again, similar to what was in some of these demos, I think it's disappeared. Basically, we can now then reference that instead of defining, the 100 pages of code. We can then reference it now in like 20 lines or something like that with some additional configuration. You still have to configure it for your environment, but a lot of the best practices are baked in.
Then another question from Luke. can we integrate the GitHub MCP server into a pull request policy under a service account, not a user context, that will run a trigger action and add comments to the PR in agent mode? And I think he gives a use case after that. He says use case and PR policy. For example, attempt to fix linting errors run under a standard PR policy and add comments to say what it addressed or attempted to fix.
So yeah, so as far as I'm aware today, and generally most of the Microsoft stuff, including GitHub, is really in your context. And so obviously the purpose is that it's not an arbitrary server that has access to your whole environment. It just is allowed to interact with the stuff that you have, so it has your context. So so at the moment, that's it's sort of operating. Could you build your own MCP server that has permissions to then do things that a user doesn't have? Absolutely. But in terms of the GitHub product, it's going to be in your context and restricted to that. If you have the ability to do that, like create an issue, update an issue, or pull request, which you probably do, then yes, you could go ahead and from the MCP servers on the web here, you could go ahead and install the GitHub one, and then you could interact with the GitHub Copilot, and it could go ahead and update your PRs or your issues or whatever, right? Such that you could sort of say, hey, give me go ahead and look at all the issues that are assigned to me, tell me the top 2 that I should work on today, right? And then it should be able to tell you, and you could even potentially string that along and sort of say, okay, let's start on the first one and let's create a branch for it, right? So that's the general concept. And probably just on a side to that, which we'll come back to the other questions in a sec as well. But you can actually go ahead and, if you didn't know, let me make sure we're reshared because it looks like it's disappeared. Let me try that again. It's actually entirely possible these days. I didn't show it because, again, it was about MCP and how it connects in their broader context. But today it's actually possible to go to GitHub and go ahead and assign GitHub Copilot to that issue, and it will actually pick it up and start working on it, right? And it will create a draft PR. There's some that I have prepared before, right? It'll create a draft PR. And then basically go through a code review process. And as you review the PR, it'll take notes and actually then make those changes as a result, right? Under your context, though, although it's assigned to GitHub Pilot, it's again acting in your behalf. So you can't then approve this request either if you've got branch policies that say that an additional approver is required because it did it in your behalf. So you can't approve your own pull request, right? You'd need to get somebody else.
Can you just go back one page on that browser tab? And that's adding its own little AI flag underneath the bolded text as well.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it says it's contributed to it. Yeah.
And on the body text as well.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. Was there another question, Dan?
No, Luke just confirmed, saying, yep, okay, cool, create issue for my PR, and it will make those changes under my context, under my user account in GitHub Copilot licensing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Bernie, I feel like just throwing it out there, you could create another GitHub account and then have another computer and then have your AI tooling set up there and then have different permissions on that different GitHub account and start to sort of create like an agent with a separate account that starts to do some of the things that Luke's talking about there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Get
absolutely.
around the fact that it doesn't have to run as your context, but
Yeah.
for the context of another GitHub user that has different permissions.
Yeah.
And therefore the AI can use the GitHub MCP server or whatever. So you can sort of
Absolutely.
outsource that to
And
another account.
A custom MCP server that then has an additional account will solve that problem too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not part of the default as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
I think we're good for questions. So quick one and then we'll break. Go ahead.
Now, just following up on the previous question. So ARM templates worked great.
Yes.
Not readable. So Bicep is iteration on top of ARM templates, which makes them more readable, adds a couple of features. Right?
Yeah.
So, but it was still pre-AI era. So bringing tools and features you talk today, you experience here. Do you envision, but not Microsoft, but you personally with your experience, like do you envision any other iteration of Bicep that will be more AI friendly or suitable for AI?
So will there be a newer version of Bicep or something equivalent that then is more AI friendly?
Yeah.
Good question. It's hard to say. I feel like at the moment that then I guess where MCP, because it's so early, it sort of solves a lot of that. But is it a fix for everything? Maybe, maybe not. It's probably hard to say. But I guess really the precursor to that is, well, the Bicep extension now has it has this Bicep MCP server. I didn't install that MCP server. That actually just came through the extension. So I've got Bicep in my VS Code, and the latest update that came out a few days ago happened to have this MCP server as part of the extension itself. So at the moment, it says obviously experimental, right? At the moment, it does things such as get the AZ resource type schema, pretty helpful if you want to then have a coding tool, then do the right syntax correctly the first time. It needs to understand the resources and what properties they have. It has Bicep best practices. Well, yeah, we probably want it to ideally write Bicep code in the recommended way. And list AZ resource types by provider, which is really a bit of additional information for the first one. So it can look up and then know what it has and then choose the right schema. Do I envisage there'll be more tools that come to that, just that then know how Bicep works and things like that? Absolutely. So yeah, I feel like that there was a lot of stuff, and I know that there's a lot of people working hard to then expose that. And really, the MCP part really does make it basically provides a interface that then is more specialized for AI to basically then use Bicep. Will that change the language entirely? Hard to say, but I think what we've got at the moment or is coming in the near future is really good already. Yeah. So with that, I'll end the presentation, but I am around, so feel free to come up and ask me more questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Bernie. So everybody who comes to this group knows that we really appreciate our speakers, and really, Bernie should get 2 bottles tonight because he's in 2 capacities. Not only does he speaking tonight, but also he is our Microsoft host, and he is here every single session and staying around till 8 o'clock or past or whatever it is until he can kick us out. So we really appreciate that support. Bernie, thanks so much.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to ask you 2 favors before you leave. Is that if you brought a bottle or any food or anything like that, just please bring it outside with you and leave it out there. And the second thing I was going to ask is if everyone who had a chair here, if you just stack a chair on that stack on this side, leave those alone when they're going to go back around the table. So on that side, so that they leave the room and set up. And keep your eyes peeled. Next month, we are looking for a speaker for next month, but we haven't got to confirm. So keep an eye on the meetup site. Thank you.